Black Lives Matter has gained a lot of steam in the minds and consciousness of both Americans and the international world. Indeed, George Floyd's murder shocked the consciousness of many Americans and revealed to them something that had been occurring for a very long time: the unrequited ill of police brutality, in the sense that Americans have not been able to requite that ill for a very long time, and they shouldn't have to requite that ill, for evil does not drive out evil, and likeness certainly, sure as hell, does not purge likeness. However, amid this terrible, catastrophic event, upon which the chorus of the world rebelled against what happened, condemned the officers, and the officers are now, or at least Derek Chauvin, who put his foot on George Floyd's neck and killed him, is now facing murder charges, and the rest are facing accomplice charges. Amid all of this, Black Lives Matter proclaims that they are indeed the default warriors against injustice in the world, or at least as it pertains to black people. Oh yes, if you are against Black Lives Matter, you are apparently for a lot of injustices. If you are against their idea of what a revolution is, you are apparently indeed for a lot of bad things that have happened to African Americans. If you have a divergent opinion of Black Lives Matter, or God forbid, you support the current president, you are, I won't even utter what they say, but an Uncle Tom, or, if they want to get creative, a coon. Excuse my language, but that's where we're at now. The problem I have with all of this is that Black Lives Matter has not only co-opted language, which is a very Marxian tactic that Foucault and a lot of other people talked about doing as a means to deconstruct the current system, to sort of create a meta-narrative. Black Lives Matter has co-opted the term revolution. Oh yes, they say we need a revolution. And this was the entire spirit of Bernie Sanders' campaign in the 2020 Democratic primary, that we need a revolution. In fact, the current Democratic primary nominee, the current presidential nominee for the Democrats, Joe Biden, quite literally said as a rebuttal to this that we don't need a revolution, which is probably the smartest thing that came come out of that man's mouth. But still, the idea that we need a revolution against this injustice, and if we don't get it, then my lord, it'll be bad news. Teen Vogue said in an op-ed that was quite gloomy towards anyone who disagreed with Black Lives Matter, and quite indeed cheerful of their efforts, so that Black Lives Matter's revolution must not be co-opted by politicians. The New York Times even mentioned how the perceptions of Americans in general are changing amid George Floyd's death, and they are more supportive of Black Lives Matter. So we are approaching a point here, my friends, where revolutions and completely and utterly upheaval and destroying institutions is the primary mode of action in American political history, or at least in American political activism. But I say that there is indeed a better way. Oh yes, I say that Black Lives Matter is not actually aspiring to what they should be. Revolution is not a bad thing. But revolution, as it is being portrayed by Black Lives Matter, is most certainly a bad thing. Because their revolution, my friends, is nothing more than how a wheel revolves around its axis. Oh yes, their revolution is simply going around in a cycle of victimology, a cycle of anger, a cycle of destruction, a cycle of yelling, a cycle of just things that do not ultimately promote our higher selves as human beings. Is this to say that everything Black Lives Matter says or does should be scorned because it's associated with them? Of course not. That'd be absolutely an ad hominem, and we're not going to do that here, on my channel at least. There are plenty of commentators on both sides of the aisle who would love to do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be as honest as possible. Black Lives Matter has indeed brought to the forefront important issues. Police brutality is an important issue. Law enforcement reform is an important issue. Policing itself, punitive or rehabilitation, important issue. Militarism, important issue. A lot of these things are important issues, but as we understand, my friends, almost as important as the issue itself is how we view the issue, by what lens we see the issue through. And unfortunately, Black Lives Matter does not see the lens prudently. They see the lens as they are shackled to the idea of identity. They see it almost entirely through their skin color, through their identity, and through history, past transgressions, and not what is actually currently going on right now. Or if things are currently going on right now, They will almost always describe them in terms of racism or non-racism, racism or anti-racism, and never attribute any other cause or value to those particular things. Let me give you an example. Housing discrimination. Apparently, since there was indeed redlining in the 60s, and the housing authority quite literally banned it because it was a wrong thing, it was a baleful thing, we should believe, since African Americans live in certain communities now and whites live in certain communities in certain cities, that there are currently redlining practices still going on. That is the dominant view. And the geolocation of African Americans and whites in some areas, which are not that big by the way, are considered an act of racism. Disparities, and this is a rich one, in the effects of the coronavirus, a pathogen which is not sentient, which is a lower form of life, which has no conception of race or justice, social or otherwise, is considered racist. The virus's effects are considered racist, or, more true to what they are saying, are more magnetized in African American communities because of racist things, or whatever, because of disparities in funding for certain African American communities, or whatever. Disparities are almost always seen as racist, not as a logical conclusion of existence. Disparities exist because human beings themselves have massive disparities and always have massive disparities. There is no true equality. There should be political equality, that all individuals are treated equally according to a higher order set of standards in political situations. But there is no metaphysical equality. Metaphysically, or more so ontologically, we are all very different. No one's DNA, no one's genome, no one's composition on this earth is going to be just like someone else's. Even twins diverge in their biological, mental, sociological, and philosophical composition. However, it is this idea, this revolution, which wants to revolve around old standards, ancient standards of identity and racism, ancient standards of a cycle that you cannot break out of with individual free will, ancient standards which had bound African Americans to the block of mediocrity for so long. It is them, my friends, who seek to revolutionize things when they truly are only entrapping all of us into this cycle. That is my problem with this idea that Black Lives Matter is revolutionary. They are not. A revolution is attached to higher order ideals, which can be objectively proven and which are immediate to everyone. That's the American Revolution. The American Revolution, and the founders themselves, for all their faults, believed in natural rights, the idea that each and every human being has value immeasurable, value undeniable, observable in nature, that institutions themselves secure via the government, via the levels of power. And that is what the founders fought for, and that is what the American Revolution fought to manifest upon this earth, and they did manifest the greatest iteration of that thought in material form on this earth in the form of America. That's revolution. That is breaking cycles, breaking shackles, breaking curses, and freeing people's both physical bodies and mental states from mediocrity, from a static mindset, and turning it into a dynamic mindset. That is it. Black Lives Matter, they have some points in some areas, but their overall prism and mindset is not good for anyone, and it only regresses the very potential that we as human beings, and we as Black Americans even, have bound in our DNA. That is why I don't think Black Lives Matter is revolutionary, and that is why I will always say that Black Lives Matter eternally gives revolution a bad name. Until next time, guys, please stay pensive.